Welcome back, everyone. Excellencies, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let's turn our attention to the next panel discussion on navigating global shifts, investment strategies for Islamic economies, proudly brought to you by CIMB Islamic Bank Berhad. Ladies and gentlemen, transformative geopolitical, social, and technological trends are reshaping the global economic landscape. Investors today face both unprecedented uncertainty and opportunity. Join our panelists to discuss how developing and Islamic economies can respond as finance and capital adapt to these global shifts. Join us on the stage is Tan Sri Andrew Sheng, MIFC Leadership Council member, and Mr. Ruggiero Lomanaco, Head of Real Estate Funds, Rasmala Investment Bank Limited. And to facilitate the discussion, please welcome Mr. Ahmad Shahriman Muhammad Shariff, CEO, CIMB Islamic Bank Berhad, and AIBIM Vice President as our moderator. Mr. Shahriman, the floor is now yours.
Assalamualaikum and very good evening to everyone. Now, we have a very exciting afternoon, and I think we are very privileged to have Tan Sri Andrew Sheng to speak this evening, as well as Mr. Ruggiero, who's actually head of real estate investment with Rasmala Bank, right? Rasmala Bank, sorry. And what we call this, Tan Sri Andrew Sheng, I don't think you need further introduction. As a former central banker, regulator, and so on, he writes regularly, and he has very strong views. And he has actually been passionately involved in Islamic finance. And every time I hear him speak, I learn a lot. And actually, he always puts me to shame because he's someone who's really passionate about Islamic finance. He really thinks about the matter to its core. Mr. Ruggiero, he's not new to Islamic finance. In fact, he started HSBC. He was one of the founding members of HSBC Abana on the investment side. Today, we have two very different perspectives. This is not a panel discussion per se. Tan Sri Andrew will give about 20 minutes talk, and he will present some of his ideas and so on, and followed by Mr. Ruggiero, about 10 minutes talk as well from his perspective. Both will be giving us very different perspectives. Tan Sri will be giving us his views on what is the new model that we should be thinking about as an industry, given the shifts or the changes in the global economy. And then whereas we're going to have the benefit of Mr. Ruggiero's long experience in dealing with investors on what actually on the ground, what they're looking at, and so on. All right, without further ado, Tan Sri, I'll pass the floor to you to start the presentation.
Hello, thank you, Shahriman. It's such a great pleasure, and I want to thank Dato' Muazzam of the Bank Islam and AIBIM. AIBIM should stand for AI Banks in Malaysia. It's such a pleasure on two very important days, in fact, three, if you include Tuanku's wonderful, keynote address, royal address, and then the speech by, Bilal, the one who was very frank. And so I will respond by entertaining you the rest of this afternoon, or in 20 minutes, how we should answer the key questions that has been presented. Now, the issue before us, I think Tuanku and Bilal challenge us that a new paradigm is necessary in this new world. So what is this paradigm, right? I'm so sorry. What is this paradigm? So the numbers that Professor Mahmoud Mohidin from the United Nations put was very clear, right? Islamic finance has 50 years of history, accounts for 24% of world population, 9% of GDP, and only 1% of global finance. So we roughly have $500 trillion worth of financial assets globally. So I don't want to say, what did we do wrong? I want to say, what did conventional finance do right or wrong, right? I mean, that's the issue that I really want to turn it around. And so I think if we all agree, including the West agrees, that finance is to support the real sector, Why is real sector suffering while people are making lots of money in the stock market? And I just want to share with you how relevant $5 trillion is. A lot of money. Did you know that NVIDIA plus Broadcom is run by a former Malaysian? Overnight, just Broadcom alone signed an agreement with OpenAI, and the shares shot up 10%, which is $168 billion, just like that. And the West cannot even bring 100 billion for ESG net zero. And we are here scrapping bits of pieces of paper, trying to save for ESG at the kampong level, 168 billion overnight. What are we doing? Right? So we really need to reframe, and this is since 2016, after Mr. Trump started MAGA. MAGA means Make America Great Again first. What is the emerging markets development model? If this is the war of elephants, what do small economies do, and what do small communities do? So that's a key question. And as you know, Adam Tooze has already said we have moved from simple crisis to polycrisis, some people call perma-crisis, right? We're in a real crisis situation. And if the old order is dying and the new order has not been born, what is the responsibility of Islamic scholars to think about the role of Islam in the new world? And how does Islamic finance fit into this? These are, fundamental questions, right? So there are 5 basic data points which are absolutely critical in this crazy world. Number 1, by 2022, solar energy cost is cheaper than fossil fuels. Now, if OIC countries own half of the world's fossil fuels, and the cost of alternative energy is cheaper, that means the wealth that you have in your hands are actually declining, not increasing. That's a strategic challenge of the first order. The second order is that capital is flowing uphill. The poor people of the world every day is financing dollars. The rich people in the poor world loves dollars, right? So America is now $36 trillion owing the rest of the world, and net is actually $26. So everyone wants to think about de-dollarization. Where is the money going to flow? Now, technically speaking, that money should flow back to the OIC countries and the global south. But it's not. It's going back into gold. So does that mean that we're going back to dinars again? Right? Think about it, right? So the international monetary system is now today more than 80% fiat money and less than 20%, physical money, right? But what is happening? The United States is spending more $1 trillion a year on interest rate payments and more than $1 trillion on defense. And at the way the interest rates are going, the US debt is unsustainable. So the more you invest in the dollar, the more actually it devalues. This is something that we really do think about it. And Ken Rogoff, former chief economist of IMF, basically said that, United States has ticked every box except the timing of when the crisis occurs. But never mind. So Bank Negara recently wrote a very fundamental paper, which I thought was brilliant and excellent, that money is either physical-based or credit-based. And it's absolutely right. This is exactly the physical world and the mental world. The mental world, an asset is something you can feel. The liability is your utang. You owe, but it's a mental item. But the interaction between liability and asset is the dynamic interaction which creates derivatives. And the beautiful part about the derivative money or credit money is that it is derived infinitely. That is why GDP, financial assets, is now 5 times world GDP. You infinitely can derive forwards, futures, options out of basic physical, right? So the problem now is that the US dollar is losing credibility. People are not so sure if the US runs this kind of deficit. What do you do? Where is this system going? Are we now going back to the dinar, gold dinar-based system that has been in centuries? I use this example. If you think about Chinese experience with paper money, out of 2,500 years since the unification of the Chinese economy, right, fiat money was only 100 years. 1911, they abandoned the silver dollars and went into central bank printing, and that went up in hyperinflation until 1949, when the revolution got back into very conservative monetary and fiscal policy. So where are we going in terms of that area? So how should Islamic finance navigate through this complexity? That, for me, is, as a non-Muslim, trying to figure out, this is true for Global South as well. Now, you all know Silicon Valley model is the new model of finance. And that model is about how they use people to use equity to actually invest in startups, and then you coach them until you IPO, and then you become public listed equity, and then you just take off. Conventional banking is statistical. If you have 100 loans and 10% of the SMEs make a default, then you must charge 10% higher interest rates to do this. But as you know, conventional banking is risk transfer. If you give me collateral, I have no risk. The risk is all transferred to you, right? Whereas equity is fairly shared. Now, we all know McKinsey has this wonderful chart which says that AI will increase productivity by 1 to 1.5%. Basically, what is this? If the whole world uses AI and every day why don't I use ChatGPT? Because every time I like to use it, pay more. So basically, AI is hamba. AI is mental colonization. I am paying AI to destroy my brain. I don't need to think for myself, right? So those of us who concentrate on this do not understand that we really need to rethink. Now, this is the Western game or the United Nations game. We must concentrate on ESG. Since 2015, when they put on ESG, what is the percentage of performance of ESG? 16% before we can get to 2030. What does that tell you? It's failed. And why has it failed? Wonderful aspiration. E, environmental justice. S, social justice. These are aspirations. They are not concrete. The only thing that delivers E and S is G. If you don't have the governance, if you cannot deliver trust and impact, you have nothing. That's why AI stands for aspirations versus impact. No impact, the aspiration is a delusion. Okay? So on that basis, let me very quickly think about this, right? I have thought long and hard of this because all my life I have been trained in the West. I worked in Hong Kong, the freest market economy in the world. I believed in the Western finance until I came back home to Malaysia. Tan Sri Zeti put me into INSEAF, and I started thinking, my God, conventional finance is broken. Because conventional finance delivers social inequality. It actually destroys the planet. Why is the planet being destroyed? Because the more I borrow, I am borrowing from the future to consume today. So I destroy the environment for my grandchildren. Ini bodoh ke tidak? Right? I mean, you cannot run this debt-driven economy to solve a cleaner, greener world. The only thing that can deliver this is equity. And what is equity? So you look at the caravans that cross the desert. They can be robbed. The nature can make them lost. They can be cheated. The only way you can get the caravans to succeed is execution, trust, and equity. Faith and Shariah, right? So actually, the Islamic model is a risk-sharing model. Zakat is that when you are rich, you have to give back to the poor, which is circular. Takaful means that you have to insure. But if you do this in silos, which what the West does, each silo delivers more cost for the rakyat, the people at the bottom, so they cannot survive. Just ask this question. 75 years since the Bretton Woods institutions was created to help the world, you name me one multi-development bank SME model that has succeeded. If you have to think out of the box, Grameen Bank succeeded because it believed in women, right? So the issue is that we really need blended finance. And what is blended finance? How can you deliver blended finance when banking is regulated one way, security is regulated one way, insurance regulated one way, etc.? Actually, you really need to shift out of the credit-based finance model to a physical, more hard budget constraint model in which you deliver real goods and services to the rakyat, to the people, not in a silo manner, but in a way you orchestrate different services to help the poor people, the privileged people to become. In short, don't give people fish, teach them how to fish. That's the wrong way because the fish is also damaging the environment, right? But never mind. Anyway, so, the Islamic model is correct. So the whole summary of my lecture is to now use Clayton Christensen, professor from MIT, on innovation and generalize it to the new development model, which I hope is an Islamic development model. And I want to say this is because if you think about it, everybody goes through the J curve. The J curve means that the people at the bottom, or the startup, actually needs seed money. It needs equity. It needs coaching. It needs mentoring. Okay? How are you going to get it? The capitalist way is that if I support this, they will go through the S curve, and then they scale or hyperscale, and then they become a unicorn. But actually, what you really want to do is that since most of the SMEs and the community people in the kampong, remember this, 40% of the world's population live in rural areas. But rural areas account for 80% of the world's forests, farmland, and marine sea resources. Why are they not getting their fair share of seed money and charity? And the answer is the Western system is, let's give it to the rich. Okay? So the Zakat concept is absolutely the circular economy, which is absolutely correct. So the question is, how do you get out of that Red Sea into the blue ocean? And the answer is those people who can make it give 10% of their Zakat to finance that seed money, then you can win. But the idea is that you do this through blending. Okay? Now, Dafina, in the earlier session, sorry, I don't know whether I have enough time. Yeah. Dafina was saying, Hong Leong Bank Islamic Finance was trying to help the kampong people. Right? But you cannot just give them money. You have to give them charity. You have to give them insurance. This is about orchestration. No longer, I only represent my organization, comply with my organization rules, I will succeed. It doesn't work like that. The kampong people need some charity, some seed money, some equity, and some whatever. If they don't have the title deed, they can never get bank loan. You and I know this, right? So who is going to help them do this? So we are now in a stage where the Western idea of domination finance, when Christopher Columbus was the first venture capitalist to tell King Ferdinand and Isabel, I will go west to discover China, right? Instead, he destroyed all the Red Indians, etc., captured all their gold, silver, then used them for tobacco trade, etc., energized the West, all right? And then became rational. We do this rationally, but they forgot the heart. what is zakat? It's about the heart, right? So in this age of uncertainty, right, the only thing that can help people is equity, is zakat. And also help from the heart. So the heart of education is the education of the heart. And, in 1775, Leibniz and all this said we can separate the mind from the body, the mind from the heart, and forgot about the heart and concentrate on rationality. Sekarang mana ada rationality with the new MAGA world? Right? So the real issue is that we have to have heart in this world. And our ancient beliefs, which has been embedded in our values, our ethical values, and our faith, right, is very, very critical. So on that note, let me put it this way, summarize very quickly. What Tuanku and Bilal are saying, we need a new paradigm. But that paradigm is not that old. That paradigm came from 1500, when they discovered America, but actually they occupied America, right? So the real issue is that we really need to get out of this mental colonization to understand we have to find each of us our own way using our ancient wisdom and philosophies to help our communities find the new road out. As long as we copy what is happening there, you will never succeed. So let me finish with my comment on the last panel over halal. And I just pose this question to you. What is the most widest used halal product in the world? Whilst you're thinking about it, the answer is Coca-Cola. Do you realize that Coca-Cola is halal because it is kosher? So when you are competing against Coca-Cola, do you concentrate on the halal certification or on the taste? The point is, don't concentrate on what others tell you to concentrate. Focus on, it's the shell game, right? They play the shell over there and they tell you think it's there. Actually, the shell is already in my pocket. So the key point about Islamic finance in going into this world of huge uncertainty is that we must have confidence in ourselves. And once we will find our own way using equity-based risk financing and, Shariah ethics. I think that way can be found. Thank you very much indeed.
All right. So as I mentioned earlier, every time Tan Sri comes up to speak, I think it puts most of us, the practitioners, to shame. His passion, his deep understanding, and so on. A whole lot of points. I feel like I'm at a lecture, and I don't think I'll be able to do you justice, Tan Sri, but I'll try my best. But I would just make some general comments before I invite Ruggiero to give his talk. I think what you have done nicely, and this is actually quite nicely linked to our topic, which is bridging traditions to the future. I think you have built a bridge to what we are trying to do in all our Zakat initiatives, social initiatives, and all the work that we are doing with the Zakat authorities and so on, where we try to, all the different banks are training entrepreneurs for people to, as what you say, teach them how to fish, right? But you have then built up that linkage to on the bigger scale in terms of realignment or realigning how we then self-help ourselves in a very differentiated world that we have now, or very changing world. And I like the statistics that you mentioned. I think we discussed earlier. For those of you who are involved, there's this talk about Asian power grid, ASEAN power grid, 765 billion requirement to help and transmit power throughout all the ASEAN countries, benefiting 700 million souls. And we've been talking non-stop how to fund it. Guess what? Last week, OpenAI spent 1 trillion just buying up all the chips to make sure that they have computing power in the future for AI. Big disparity. We have real needs, but those funds are just not coming to the region and so on. So again, Tassi, I think thank you for building the intellectual bridge for us to figure out how do we scale up and figure out that funding need for ourselves. Ruggiero, I'll pass the floor to you. and give you a very different perspective from in dealing with investors and whatnot. Thank you.
So, Tuan dan Puan, Assalamu alaikum. So, of course, I feel a little bit embarrassed to talk after Tan Sri. And also, there are many learned people. So, obviously, I will just share my experience as an investment manager. I've been managing money for the last 30 years. And I'm actually very honored to be to give this speech in Kuala Lumpur, because this is where I landed 30 years ago when I left Italy. I didn't see much future for me in Italy, and I wanted to ride this Asian tiger. I just converted to Islam, so I wanted to work in Islamic finance, and I came to Kuala Lumpur. At the time, money was a little bit in short supply. So I was using this bus mini. Do you remember these pink buses? 60 cents, yeah. And they didn't have AC, so they had the windows were open, but they were compensating with music, okay? So I went jalan-jalan in Kuala Lumpur. I had a lot of interviews, thank God. And yeah, I ended up in Islamic finance. So since the question is how do we, how money can be invested in the Muslim world, I would like to give you the perspective of someone that does invest in globally. And I've basically, start showing basically the markets in which I have invested during my career, how they have performed, and why capital is flowing in certain regions. So about 25 years ago, I launched a fund. It was a global equity fund, still running today, 25 years. It's called HSBC Islamic Global Equity Index Fund. And the idea was very simple, to invest in the largest 100 companies in the world. The day was a little bit unfortunate. It was the February 2000, and 2 months later, the dot-com bubble exploded, and the fund over the next 2 years lost 50%. But as you can see, over 25 years, it it went 5 times higher. So the performance was very interesting. So what happened during that period? During that period, the money started flowing back to the West. So we were coming from a period where the Western financial institutions had been investing in emerging markets. The Berlin Wall had fallen, and there was a desire of shifting production in low-cost countries and to transfer production in the low-cost countries. So money had been flowing out, but from that moment, money started coming back. So from 2001, 2002, there was a first, it went into real estate. And after the financial crisis, the great financial crisis, again, continued to flow towards the Western economies. I contrast that with the Islamic Emerging Market Index, that, as you can see, has done virtually nothing over that period. Now, today, we are in a situation where this particular index, it's a 54% invested in technology. So that is where the money is going. It's invested primarily in technology. And if you look at the countries where the money is going, it's 82% to the United States. So when you call, or you decide to say, I want to be diversified, I want to invest in international market, you invest $100 every single month, and out of those $100, $82 are going to the United States. By contrast, in the emerging market world, the vast majority of the money goes into information technology, materials, and then the money is going to South Korea, India, China, Taiwan. Okay, if you don't find, now you start seeing Saudi Arabia, it started absorbing capital, but you don't see anymore Malaysia, Indonesia. So one of the decisions that I took at the time, and I can stop here, I moved to Dubai. So in 2001, I went to Dubai and I made a bet, okay, of investing in that city. So this typically what I do when I want to develop a new investment thesis. I visit a city, I visit a country, and I study a lot. And I saw potential over there. And you can see I've simplified the performance of the most successful sector of Dubai, which is real estate, through the shares of MR Properties. As you can see, I've actually put back the Islamic market index and the emerging market index. And as you can see, the performance has been much higher. Okay, so in this 30 years of Islamic finance experience, of which 25 in investments, I've witnessed how a city can become successful, okay, and attract capital. So Dubai today is attracting people and capital. And that creates a template which could be replicated in other markets. I'll stop it here and we can open the floor.
Here. All right. I think we're going to put up the QR code shortly, but while waiting for questions to come out, I'll kickstart this conversation and so on by asking a few questions and so on. So maybe Tan Sri, to start off with your presentation, I think really at the heart of your presentation is about this concept of blended finance, and I like how you mentioned, in the current financial system, we kind of break down the different components and so on, at the expense of the recipients of the funds, I would say, right? Because ultimately, benefit will flow to the owners of the funds and so on, but at the expense of the recipients of the funds. And then you shared that idea of venture capital in Silicon Valley and so on. So I think one of the things that I guess most of the Islamic banks here are also learning as we do a lot of these entrepreneurship programs, and we use both grants and also microfinancing. I think a lot of the intervention that we do without us realizing is actually to increase the probability of success. Meaning we do a lot of intervention with the entrepreneurs, we teach them. So we don't just act as providers of funds, but we actively get involved in the business. So I think maybe there's a bit of shift. Maybe Tansi, if you can just comment a bit your suggestion about the VC model, the Silicon Valley model and so on.
Well, you see, the linear model of thinking was basically the Western logic, right? A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D, it's logical flow. And that's why, when the Washington Consensus was started, Walt Rostow, who was a national security advisor to, I think, Kennedy or one of them, basically talked about the takeoff model of emerging markets. So you have a Washington Consensus, free market, free capital flows, free everything, okay? You will take off like an aircraft. And the Asian financial crisis taught us that aircraft can crash also. We didn't quite understand that. And the reason why a lot of emerging markets did not take off was because nobody remembered their colonial legacy, a lot of misunderstandings, for which you suddenly realize, especially in Africa, that I'm sorry to say, one colonial master has controlled all the minerals and taken everything, and then they have left with nothing, right? So the issue, to me, is that we really need to look at life from a biological way, ecosystem way. Why is ecosystem very fashionable? Because ecosystems are complex, okay? You cannot have a very clean field. Actually, a garden that has a lot of weeds, have different types of plants, is a much more sustainable situation. In the same way for people, right? People, yesterday there was some discussion, Professor Sami from Saudi Arabia made this very good point. He said our education to go to the West is training our people to go to the West, not to stay at home, right? So the result is we unconsciously are colonized to believe that that model works without understanding why it doesn't work, right? And I was the guy who, during the Asian financial crisis, I was the one who says, excuse me, IMF, why are you saying all the victims are to blame? Oh, you got crony capitalism, you got all this. And you are the doctor. Just before the crisis, you said, Indonesia, you're okay. Malaysia, you're okay. Thailand, you may need to devalue a little bit, you're okay. And suddenly, boom, all three went. And now we realize it was COVID. It was basically contagion, right? It's not, one person suffering. And actually, the interrelationship was Japan went into trouble, and its supply chain was basically using dollar yen. And when the yen devalued, the Japanese had to pull the money back to Japan, and everybody else in ASEAN, especially Thailand, had a heart attack, right? So the minute we closed, in Malaysia, it happened. But what does this mean for our design of our programs for the people? Ecosystems mean that every person, which is the minimum part of that human ecosystem, is complex. You cannot say that person, oh, you must be exactly like what Washington consensus, you are that person. You free the market, you will succeed. Ada macam itu, right? The reality is, as Misbun Siddiq, as our global champion coach said, every person has to be trained especially to his or her own weakness, right? You coach them, you give them the right resources, then they go from, school champion to state champion to national champion, and then you go to global champion, right? And they are subject to the cruelty of global competition. So to a large extent, we cannot assume that our kampong people overnight can become global champions. This is not realistic. But that's the assumption of that model. So because it is very expensive to train, you have lots of patience, the money worked in technology for PE, VC workers. They give you money, they coach you, you become a champion, you become a startup, you get $1 billion, you make all of the money. But actually, when I thought through this system, I said, really, that's exactly Zakat, right? When you are wealthy, you should use that money to train the next generation of startups. So to a large extent, we may not be exactly in the high-tech area, but today with AI, you can become the next AI champion, right? There's no, you know what the latest buzz in Hong Kong when I was talking to, the PE funds are looking for the one-man PhD unicorn. That means I don't even need, Shahriman, yourself and myself, two of us talk about, and then we create this startup. I don't need, with AI, you don't need Andrew Sheng. You just do it yourself, right? And so if you can become the billion, the system enables any country in the world to become unicorns, right? What does that mean? If that money, the reason why us Asian unicorns, and you must be very grateful, ASEAN has got unicorns, right? Very good ones. But the trouble with those people who support those unicorns, they want to become crazy rich Asians after they listed. And they are not investing enough in the next generation, which is the spirit of Zakat, in my view, right? The spirit of Zakat should not be, I give money to somebody to manage that charity. I give because I am helping the needy to make them go to the next level. Okay? Because pure charity is not sustainable. Where does takaful come in? And this is what, talking to different people, suddenly I realized it is an ecosystem problem. You train the takaful, just motor insurance, life insurance, and special insurance. Actually, why don't we have takaful for business to succeed. And if Takaful is able to guarantee, I'm not saying guarantee everything, I'm just, you slice it professionally, then the banks can provide the Islamic funding, right? Somebody can give the equity because somebody is sharing this. So actually it is blended to the needs of your local community, your local entrepreneur, that will make them a champion. It sounds very obvious, but I'm sorry, that's the,
No, that's right. I think you've laid out very good intellectual points for us, a bit of homework for the industry as well, to figure out how we chart our way forward and so on. And really, and I think this is also something that we're also learning ourselves, doing a lot of the programs that we are doing with the entrepreneurs and whatnot. Now, I'm just trying to link back to what you're saying and with Ruggiero. No, Ruggiero, you are someone who has dealt a lot with investors, and you've heard what Tansir say about shifting and what we can do to attract funds to actually support the domestic demand and whatnot. But maybe can you give some perspective in terms of how your clients or your investors are thinking, and what kind of changes will actually attract them to actually put some of the flows? Because I think you're dealing mostly with the GCC money and so on, right?
Correct. That's correct. So there are two main trends that I am observing. One trend, and as you were seeing in my pie chart, is the prevalence, the growth of Saudi Arabia within the emerging market index. So countries in the Middle East have realized that life cannot always be exporting capital. They've realized that at some point, if they want to be self-sufficient, or better, sorry, to have strong foundations, they need to start investing in their own infrastructures, which can be economic infrastructures, roads, ports, airports, plants, but also social infrastructures, schools, hospitals. And the third wave right now of investments is in the digital transformations. So they are investing in the data centers that are powering the digital revolution. There is, however, an element of international diversification. So investors are very much aware that to invest 100% of your money in your own country can be also, here I'm talking about private investors, okay? So there is a need of diversifying the sources of income. Now, one shift that I've noticed is that, and I've deployed a lot of capital this year, is that whilst before, as I was mentioning, the money was going just following the index, all to the US, okay? Now there is a realization that you need to go off benchmark. You need to start looking at other places where to look at your money. And I've noticed allocations first moved to Europe, and more recently, very interestingly, we've been allocating to Asia. So for example, one of the funds I manage has invested in a data center developer called Vantage Data Centers that develops, it's an preferred outsource provider for Microsoft. But these companies come to Malaysia, okay? And they have developed 3 data centers, okay, in Johor and in Cyberjaya. So now, of course, they are following the hyperscalers. The Microsoft, other are following like AWS. But there is this need of investing in outside of the US in general. Now, my perspective is actually, I find this a very fascinating because if you really look at the Muslim world, okay, it's a crescent, okay, it's called Al-Hilal al-Islamiyah. In fact, when a few years ago, I came up with an idea of creating a strategy called the Islamic Al-Hilal indices. So I created 3 strategies, one for the Western Hilal, which was in North Africa, one Central Hilal, which was the Middle East, and then East Hilal, which was Malaysia, Indonesia. And I raised billions of dollars in that strategy from my desk, literally from my desk in London, I raised billions of dollars from the Middle East, and I was just sending it without even coming. I mean, for years I didn't come back, and I was sending it. Now, I noticed that with the geopolitical shifts, okay, and the tensions between the China and the US, okay, people have taken notice of what happened to Russia, okay. Russian money that was in the US and in Europe has been seized. They lost the money. So now investors are saying, well, where can we put this? How can we diversify? It's no longer a question of return or return on investment. It's actually return of the capital. Where can we invest and actually have it back? Okay. And funnily enough, the Muslim world, in a way, I mean, there are some parts that are at the border of this conflict, but we are really in a very nice location. We can offer that. Do you know how I like to say? You know, we have in Islamic finance one restriction: we cannot invest in weapons, in defense. Okay, so what do? We invest in peace. So we give people that are fighting in Europe. He says, okay, come and live in peace among us. Come and bring your families. Come and bring your capital. So the Muslim world, I mean, and I'm saying the whole crescent, okay, has a chance of becoming the next place where the wealth can be, and not only the wealth, the families, your personal life can be stored safely. That's a very, very important asset.
I like that point with the term I say return of capital, not even return of investment, return of the capital that you invested. And I think that's the catalyst, right? So, I mean, my take from the conversations that we've been having and so on, really, there's a moment of opportunity that we have at the moment. I think Tan Sri Rasmala always say about we already have the building blocks. I think Tan Sri said it, Governor said it, even Tuanku also said it, that the building blocks have already been built by the industry. And now we have the catalyst being Trump, being the geopolitical changes and so on, where people start to say, yeah, I should move my money around, and there's a realization that we need to depend on ourselves. We can't really depend on others and so on. So I think very big movements and so on happening, and I think it's up to us, in the industry as well, to take up the mantle of change. Now, I'm mindful that we have about 10 minutes left before the end of the session. A lot of audience were listening intently. Before I go to the questions on the Slido, would anyone like to ask questions to Tan Sri and Ruggiero from the floor before I go to the questions on the Slido? Any interested parties to ask questions to Tan Sri or Ruggiero from the floor? All right. Okay, let me go to the questions, and I'll take a bit of license to select the interesting ones and so on. Okay, so I think there's one question from David, which is, what structural governance mindset shift must occur in the public-private sectors to back long-term investments in Global South with the same urgency like AI? So I guess we were talking about a lot of investment to AI. So what kind of mindset shift or changes that needs to happen in the public and private sectors for those investments to be made into this Global South? Ruggiero, would you like to start off first? Then maybe I'll ask Tan Sri as well.
I mean, I'll try. I hope I don't get in trouble. Okay. I think that the big mindset is to open culturally, okay, to welcome people to live in your countries. So, I mean, in our part of the world, I mean, in the Middle East, we really lacked people. So we welcome, and now we are welcoming them to stay, okay? Coming with their families and investing. Ray Dalio is moved to Abu Dhabi, okay? Now here in Malaysia, for example, you have this Malaysia, my second home. I have friends that moved here in the very first wave, where you just basically place 250,000 ringgit on a deposit and you get. Now I understand it's becoming more and more difficult, okay? So this type of mindset, okay, I don't know how possible, but I think that if we really want to, I mean,
yeah, I think
if you've been to the US,
saying that, right?
If you have been to the US, okay, when you go to the US, I mean, this is the good old days, not now, okay? It was such a welcoming country, and that has been the success, to attract people from all Works of love are given the possibility. If you can do that, if we can do that across the Muslim world, I think that that will be a really, really big plus.
Yeah, Ruggiero, I fully agree with you that I think, there's a Malay saying, tak kenal maka tak cinta. If you do not know somebody, then you wouldn't love the person. I think just physically coming and seeing, I think makes a lot of difference. Completely valid point. Tan Sri, on the mindset shift, mindset change. Yeah.
Yeah, when after I stepped down from SFC, when I was in SFC, the Securities and Futures Commission in Hong Kong, every day I was lecturing on corporate governance. Afterwards, I shut up already. Why did I shut up? Because I said, the Americans are telling me all about Glass-Steagall, all these things, and nothing seems to change. The guys who create all these financial crimes, they are living in Bahamas with higher bonuses. The ones who, if you build a bridge and the bridge goes down, the guy goes to jail. What kind of incentive is this? So I will refuse to talk about a morality issue. But suddenly I come to realize, ultimately, it is not the governance that the West always talks about best standard. The best is what I tell you what it is. That's rubbish. The best standard is what fits it's not best standard, it's best fit, best practice. And what is best practice is best local, not global. The trouble is that all these ideas of globalization was for global dominance. The real democracy is local democracy. And that is at the kampong level and the family level. Right? So once we begin to accept that, and we accept that there are standards which you do not betray, then your governance can be more effective. So what is effective? It's impact, right? It is impact on two things. Number one, you actually deliver what you promise you want to deliver. And secondly, you deliver the trust that you say you want to deliver, you actually deliver.
And that's right. I think that's a very good point. I think you're talking about best fit, and as it's a very localized view. And I would like to bring back to what you said earlier, which is, Islamic finance practitioners or the industry itself, we must have confidence to showcase the right things and the good things that we're doing, rather than thinking that the West always knows best. The Western model is always best, right? Thank you, Tati. Okay, one question I will take from the Slido, and then before we'll wrap up. I think the first question, I think it's quite interesting. It says that, how can we efficiently unlock or scale up social finance, considering the structural issue of its management being under state purview rather than federated? So I think that's a bit, I think it links up to Malaysia, because, so to give context, my take is that here they're referring to Zakat and waqf in Malaysia is managed at the state level rather than the federal level. But I think there's a bigger question there. Even if it's federated, the fact that it's actually run by the public sector rather than by the community itself, does that impact its effectiveness? A bit of a theoretical question, but maybe, yeah. Okay, Tasri, maybe you want to give some views?
Okay. This idea of circular economy is absolutely right, except, the Melinda Gates Foundation, I think, I think it was Melinda, but could be somebody else, that financed the idea of the circular, did not articulate in practical terms. Circular economy means that water must flow. Liquidity is about water must flow. And if the zakat goes into a trustee, but the trustee may not be able to give that flow of resources back to the people who need it, then the flow doesn't happen, and then you do not get the benefits of it, right? So, if you really look at the way water, it plays such an important part in our daily lives. In Bali, as you know, traditionally, they actually have the one water day. Similarly, in every rice kampung, they do this, right? On one day, they flood the fields with water, rather than the American expert or the Western expert come in and say, oh, you must use chemical fertilizer. Siapa manufacture chemical fertilizer? Oh, you must use the genome seed. Oh, you must use the pesticide. Actually, if you use the water at the same time, allow it to flow, the water in the fields are clean. You have fish, so you eat more protein. You know, your water is not poison, right? And actually, the one day the water flows, it kills all the insects. So to a large extent, our ancient wisdoms and the way, you know, democratically our people tell how to do, rather than some outsider come in and tell you this is the right way of doing it. So, you know, as you know, gradually what has happened in the world today is that the green rice revolution has been reversed because, you know, too much chemical fertilizer, too much chemical pesticide actually is showing decline in the production. So I think we going back to our old ways is much more sustainable and much more healthy for everybody.
That's right. All right. So as we wrap up the panel, maybe I'll invite both Ruggiero and Tan Sri to give, say a few closing words before we wrap up the panel. Maybe Ruggiero, I'll start with you first.
Sure. Actually, there was a nice question that I can use that.
You can use that as your segue.
So it was, the question is, the idea of Islamic finance is good, but even Islamic banking still run on a Western credit, if not model, to decide bankability. What is the real Islamic finance? My comment here, and I know that of this 5 trillion of the Islamic finance industry, 70% is actually in Islamic banking, okay? If you look at a bank like UBS, for example, you can see that the balance sheet is like 1/10 of the actual money that they really manage. So what is the real Islamic finance? I mean, of course, Islamic banking is Sharia compliant, but one of the principles of Islamic finance was that it should have been based on profit and loss sharing model. Well, there is a very simple alternative to that, to the bank. It's called the mutual fund. Okay, so you have, and also investing in listed companies. So the alternative, okay, is to have more listed companies, more access to the easy access to stock markets. Okay, and then today with your mobile phone, you can click one button, and in 1 second you can invest in any company around the world, primarily in the US right now. But if you integrate your stock market, and who better than Tan Sri knows this, to the rest of the world, that is where you can stimulate Islamic finance, because every company can be listed and becomes accessible to the whole world.
And that's a good question for you to pick up. And again, fully agree. And we also get this question often enough. The reality is, finance is a spectrum, right? At the very far end is actually what we do with the zakat work, grant money and whatnot. No expectation of returns. Then you have microfinancing, a form of financing, debt-based. And then eventually you have the equity model. It is a spectrum, and as the name implies in the question, Islamic banking is only one part of the spectrum. And really, it's not about stopping or changing Islamic banking. It's about expanding the role of Islamic finance in the whole spectrum. And I think that's my take from what Tan Sri has been talking about into the border, blended model, and so on. Tan Sri, maybe your 1 minute wrap up. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to make 2 points. The first one, don't believe anything I say. The issue is that when an old man reaches a certain age, the only thing he has left is passion. I'm not talking about the physical kind. I'm not talking about the orange guy. The second point that I really want to make is actually a summing up of what I learned from this wonderful conference, thanks to AIBIM. You know, Tuanku set the tone. We have got all the building blocks. We need to connect the dots. What is missing? And the answer is actually go back to fundamentals. And the fundamentals are, the old model is not working. We have to create our own new model, right? And that's about ownership and stewardship. And I think, you know, what Omar Sheikh and all this was saying, you know, what in my simple interpretation of what Omar is saying, you know, don't be reactive. You have to be proactive. Just listen to Nike. Just do it. Okay? Life is not about perfection. Only the Almighty is perfect. We human beings are imperfect. And don't allow the pursuit of perfection to become the enemy of the good. Right? So what we can achieve for the rakyat is really what matters, not what we achieve for the elite. The present system is actually a highly concentrated system. The elite remains to dominate. But our ancient philosophies, in which we have always all survived, irrespective of whatever religion and whatever race or gender or whatever it is about, harmony, balance, faith. Right? That's all it is. Thank you.
And that is an excellent way to end this panel. Thank you so much, Tan Sri Ruggiero. Excellent talk.
Thank you very much to our esteemed panelists and moderator for an insightful discussion. Gentlemen, please be at the center of the stage for a group photo session.